We're joined by Greg Swenson, who's the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Welcome back to In Focus. Greg, thank you very much for being here with us. So Britain has pledged to raise defence spending. Many say it's still not enough. How urgently does the UK need to rearm and up its defence spending?
Yeah, Mark, it's a great question. I don't think it's urgent in terms of timing. I think what's happened with the Russia and Ukraine conflict is it's inspired the Western European countries to reconsider their defense and security policies. And so that's good news. I don't think it's urgent, like it doesn't have to happen overnight. But the UK has slowly, been reducing defense spending over the years to the point where it's just inadequate. Again, the UK is punching above its weight in terms, compared to many other European countries, especially the large economies like Germany, France, Spain, Italy. But I do think they need to increase the spending. I think that's become a reality, not just because of the fairness of, the US providing this guarantee and the European countries not meeting their requirements, but also it's better for Europe, and it also and will allow the US to pivot toward Asia. And I think the UK will be very much involved with that pivot to Asia. They have assets around the world. They have a substantial navy, nothing like it used to be. But I think that it'll be more working in partnership with the US, not in spite of the US.
And as of course, you're a American Republican, so you're a small state guy.
Yeah.
Starmer, of course, is going to have some difficult trade-offs. He's already cut foreign aid.
Yeah.
Do you think he's going to have to raise taxes as well?
I hope not, but I think that's always a possibility with a Labor government or any political party on the left, and that's
Well,
always a
you say
risk.
that. I'm just going to interrupt a second because
Yeah.
if defense has to be paid for, it's got to come from somewhere, right?
Right. And I think it's, so obviously it's either higher taxes or lower spending elsewhere. And I would argue that lowering spending elsewhere is the right move. Raising taxes doesn't necessarily come with a commensurate increase in tax revenues. In fact, if they really wanted to increase tax revenues, they'd lower the tax rate to create economic growth and higher wages. And that ends up leading to its classic supply side argument. But I do think there's a risk of that. But it has to come from somewhere. And again, this increase in defense spending is long overdue. The military here, both the Navy and the Army in the UK, is just not up to its prior standards. And so they're going to have to do this. It's better for the US, it's better for the UK, and frankly, it's better for the West. And so, I hope it happens quickly, but it doesn't, I wouldn't call it an emergency, unless they plan on going into, Ukraine and fighting in that war, which is not the intention. So, it's probably refreshing to see both the UK and the other Western European countries trying to step up. Right now, it's just talk, and it's been talk for 3 years. The Germans, made a big policy change back in February of 2022, and then they shelved it, within a year or so. So, we have to see action, not just talk. But it sounds like the prime minister is serious about this, and I think they will have to look for spending cuts elsewhere.
And for a long time, the UK has relied on its special relationship, as it likes to call it, with the White House, whoever might be in office. Is that
Yeah.
relationship still reliable, do you think?
Yeah, it really is. And I think it will be different for the UK as opposed to the other Western European countries. So I think that special relationship is there. President Trump really likes the UK. They also don't have a significant trade surplus with the US. They might even have a deficit. But whether it's a surplus or a deficit, it's minimal. And so President Trump doesn't have a natural sort of built-in conflict in terms of trade, where he's got, the U.S. has a major trade deficit with the EU, but that's not the case with the UK. So no, and President Trump really likes the UK. He's got connections, Scottish heritage, for example. He had 2 visits in his first term. He's got another state visit coming up. So the president has a great relationship with the king, with Prince William. He had a great relationship with the Queen. and also with Boris Johnson when he was prime minister. So I think he'll develop a relationship with Keir Starmer. That's already started. They had dinner in the fall during the campaign. And then, as you saw last week with the prime minister visiting the White House, that was a very productive and diplomatic visit.
And they seem to get on very well. They certainly get on better than Trump did with Zelensky in the meetings last week. Some people in Britain, when it comes to the politicians and people in Whitehall, some believe that Trump can still be managed with diplomacy. Do you think that's realistic?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I'm not sure that he needs to be managed diplomatically. I think again he's got a great relationship with the UK. I don't think you'll see the kind of tariff threats to the UK that you'll see elsewhere. He just wants to make sure things are reciprocal. So if there are tariffs coming from our trading partners, he just wants to have he used that word constantly in his speech the other night. As long as it's reciprocal. So I think there's a great future for the US-UK relationship.
Britain, of course, used to play a massive role, like the United States does now, on the world stage. It's been diminished in recent decades.
Yeah.
But does this create an opportunity for Britain to play a much bigger role? And as you mentioned, the phrase "punching above its weight."
Yeah. Yeah, I think it does. It is quite diminished versus, their sort of past, their glorious past of the British Empire. But they've been paying, at least 2% of GDP, or significantly more than 2%. So they've never been on the list of countries that are not meeting their minimum standards. Granted, again, it's still inadequate compared to what they were even 20 years ago. The Army is dramatically smaller. Many fewer ships are sailing. The carrier's been, they're inadequate to say the least, the carrier fleet. So I think it's a chance to upgrade. It's never going to be the great British Empire of 100 years ago, but it's a really important partner with the United States. They do have a really powerful military presence in the world. Of course, not compared to the US, but compared to everybody else, it's pretty significant. And I think it'll be really important to upgrade and then continue that partnership with the US.
I think it's worth mentioning that you mentioned the British Empire and called it glorious and great. I'm sure many viewers watching right now might not agree with those terms.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mark.
But the UK economy is in a mess. I mean, since Brexit, with COVID and everything, it's an absolute mess. How on earth is the country going to afford to defend Ukraine?
Yeah, I think again, it's got to be spending cuts and liberate the economy. And I'm not sure that the Labour government will do that. And I'm not picking on Labour here. I mean, the Conservative, the Tory party was just as bad, governing in many ways from the economic left. They had tax increases, they had price caps, they had windfall taxes, fracking ban, fracking ban on natural gas development. So, they did a lot of things that were destructive to the economy. 20 years ago, the United Kingdom was energy independent. Now they import virtually all their energy and power. And so it's going to be a massive turnaround if they choose to do it. But if you tax and regulate, you're really going to tamper economic growth and wage growth. So I've started to see, some hints of deregulation from the Labour government, especially around housing. But there has to be a massive deregulation if they continue with the climate, the net zero climate policy. That's destructive to the economy. I'm starting to see that pushed to the back burner quite a bit. So, and again, that's not on Labour. I mean, that was very much part of the Conservative government as well. So it's not only going to take, a change in party in 2029. I think it has to start now to liberate the economy, and that will ultimately end up with higher tax revenues.
Okay, I'm going to end it here, but always a pleasure to have you on, Greg Swenson, who is from the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program.